She saw Mafia boss being beaten. The only one who stepped in changed everything. The neon-drenched streets of Chicago hide 1,000 sins, but some secrets refuse to stay buried in the dark. She was just a trauma nurse, trying to outrun her bloodline. He was the city's most feared apex predator, suddenly turned into prey. When Sofia stepped into that rain-slicked alley, wielding nothing but a rusted steel pipe and sheer defiance, she didn't just interrupt a murder. She altered the fate of an entire criminal empire, proving that even in a world ruled by monsters, true power belongs to those who refuse to look away. The relentless Chicago rain felt like icy needles against Sofia Bianchi's skin as she hurried down the dimly lit pavement of the Lower West Side. It was 2:14 a.m. She had just finished a grueling 16-hour shift at St. Jude's Memorial Hospital. Her scrubs, smelling faintly of antiseptic, stale coffee, and the metallic tang of other people's tragedies. At 26, Sofia had spent the last 5 years meticulously erasing her past. She had traded the opulent, blood-stained halls of the Bianchi estate for a cramped, leaky studio apartment and a life of grueling, honest labor. She was a ghost by choice. But the city had a way of resurrecting ghosts. As she passed the narrow mouth of a dead-end alley, a sharp, sickening sound pierced the rhythmic drumming of the rain. It was a heavy, wet thud bone against brick, followed by a low, guttural groan. Sofia froze. Her survival instincts, honed both by the ER and her dark childhood, screamed at her to keep walking. "Not your problem," a voice whispered in her mind. "Keep your head down." Then came the laughter, cruel, jagged, and unmistakably predatory. The great, untouchable titan, a rough voice sneered. "Look at you now. You bleed just like the rats you order us to exterminate." Another kick connected with a sickening crunch. Sofia's grip tightened on the handle of her umbrella. She knew the golden rule of this city: never intervene in the shadows business. But beneath her exhaustion, a spark of fierce, unyielding dignity ignited. She had spent her life watching the strong devour the weak. She had become a nurse to heal, not to look away. Without thinking, Sofia dropped her umbrella. Her eyes scanned the debris near the alley entrance and locked onto a heavy, rusted iron pipe leaning against a dumpster. She grabbed it, the cold metal grounding her racing pulse. She stepped into the gloom. 3 men, built like brick walls and wearing dark, soaked leather, were gathered around a crumpled figure on the asphalt. The victim was an older man, his once immaculate charcoal Brioni suit torn and soaked in a mixture of rain and dark, pooling blood. "Hey!" Sofia's voice cracked like a whip, echoing off the narrow brick walls. It wasn't the trembling voice of a frightened civilian. It was a voice laced with the absolute, terrifying authority she had subconsciously inherited from the man she hated most. The 3 attackers turned, startled. "Back off!" Sofia yelled, stepping forward, raising the iron pipe. She slammed it against the corrugated steel of the dumpster. The deafening clang reverberated like a gunshot. "The police are 2 blocks away. I already hit the emergency dial. You have exactly 30 seconds before this alley is swarming with blue lights." The leader of the thugs, a scarred brute with a serpent tattoo creeping up his neck, squinted through the rain. "Crazy bitch. You just signed your own death warrant." He took a step toward her. Sofia didn't flinch. She stared directly into his dead, soulless eyes. "I'm a trauma nurse at St. Jude's. I know exactly how much pressure it takes to shatter a human trachea with this pipe. Come find out if I'm bluffing, or run and collect whatever pathetic bounty you were promised." The sirens of a distant ambulance wailed into the night, perfectly timed by fate. The thugs exchanged uncertain glances. The illusion of a police response was enough. "Vargas is going to want confirmation," one muttered. "He's dead anyway," the leader spat, looking down at the unmoving body. "Let's go." They scattered into the darkness like roaches fleeing the light. Sofia let out a shuddering breath, the iron pipe slipping from her trembling fingers. She rushed to the victim, dropping to her knees in the puddle of bloody rainwater. Sir, can you hear me? I'm a nurse. I'm going to help you." She rolled the man onto his back to assess his airway. The street lamp flickered above, casting a pale, yellow glow across his battered face. Silver hair, a sharp jawline bruised and broken, and a distinct, faint crescent scar above the left eyebrow. Sofia's heart stopped. The breath vanished from her lungs. It was a face she hadn't seen in 5 years. A face she had tried to burn from her memories. Leonardo Bianchi, the undisputed don of the Chicago Syndicate. A man who held the city's politicians in one pocket and its criminals in the other. Her father. Leonardo's eyes fluttered open, glassy and unfocused. He coughed, blood spilling over his lips, and his gaze locked onto the young woman holding him. For a second, the cold, calculating mafia boss vanished, replaced by a ghost of a memory. Sofia? He wheezed, his voice a broken rasp. Sofia's hands shook as she pressed her fingers against his neck, feeling the weak, thready pulse. The man she blamed for her mother's death, the man whose empire was built on suffering, was dying in her arms. Morality and vengeance warred violently in her chest. She could walk away. She could let the city finally take its revenge on the devil himself. But as she looked down at the broken titan, she didn't see a mob boss. She saw a patient. "God help me," Sofia whispered. She tore the fabric of his expensive shirt to apply pressure to a deep stab wound on his side. "Stay awake, old man. You don't get to die this easily." There was no calling an ambulance. If the men who attacked Leonardo were brazen enough to hunt him in the streets, the hospital would be a slaughterhouse. Jude's was riddled with informants on the syndicate's payroll. Taking him to an ER was equivalent to handing him over to his executioners. Fueled by a cocktail of adrenaline and deeply ingrained survival instincts, Sofia managed to drag her father's dead weight the 3 blocks to her apartment. It was a miserable, agonizing journey. By the time she hauled him through the service entrance and into her ground floor unit, they were both drenched in blood and sweat. She kicked the door shut, throwing the deadbolt, the chain, and dragging a heavy oak chair under the handle. The apartment was sparse, a testament to her ascetic lifestyle. A bed, a small kitchenette, and walls lined with medical textbooks. Sofia dragged Leonardo onto the worn linoleum floor of the kitchen, the easiest surface to bleach later. "Don't move," she ordered coldly, stripping off her wet jacket. She retrieved her emergency medical trauma kit, a stolen supply of sutures, lidocaine, combat gauze, and IV fluids she kept for treating undocumented immigrants who couldn't risk the hospital. Leonardo watched her through half-swollen eyes. He was breathing in shallow, ragged gasps, 3 broken ribs, a punctured lung, severe facial contusions, and a deep laceration near his liver. "You grew up," he managed to say, coughing violently. "Shut up," Sofia snapped, snapping on a pair of blue nitrile gloves. "Save your breath. You're going into hypovolemic shock." She worked with mechanical precision, entirely detached. She administered the local anesthetic, cleaned the jagged knife wound with iodine, and began suturing the torn flesh. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the rain lashing against the barred window and Leonardo's strained breathing. "You should have left me there," Leonardo whispered, wincing as the needle pierced his skin. "You hate me." "I do hate you," Sofia replied, her voice eerily calm. She didn't look at his eyes, focusing entirely on the needle. "But I took an oath to preserve life. Even lives that don't deserve it." Leonardo closed his eyes, a shadow of profound regret crossing his hardened features. It was Vargas. Mateo Vargas. Sofia paused, the needle hovering. Mateo Vargas, her father's right-hand man, the underboss he had treated like a son, the man who used to bring her imported chocolates when she was a little girl. Mateo orchestrated a coup, Leonardo continued, his voice gaining a fraction of its old gravelly authority despite the pain. "Bought out my captains. Paid off the police. They hit my convoy on the Eisenhower. I barely made it out. They're going to purge everyone loyal to me. And anyone who helps me." Sofia tied off the final stitch and sat back on her heels, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her wrist. The reality of the situation crashed down on her. "You mean anyone like the nurse who just interrupted your assassination?" Leonardo looked at her, his dark eyes filled with a terrifying clarity. Did they see your face, Sofia? She hesitated. The street lamp, the leader looking right at her. Yes. Leonardo tried to sit up, groaning in agony as his broken ribs protested. You fool. You stupid, brave fool. You need to pack. You need to leave the city right now. I'm not running, Sofia said, standing up to hang an IV bag of saline from the cabinet handle. This is my home. I built a life here. A clean life. Away from your blood money. There is no clean life anymore, Leonardo barked, though it ended in a weak cough. Matteo is a rabid dog. He doesn't leave loose ends. Once he finds out a nurse from street, Jude saved me. He will tear this city apart to find you. When he realizes who you are, he won't just kill you, Sofia. He'll make it a spectacle to prove I have no legacy left. Sofia stared at the man on the floor. For years, she had viewed him as an invincible, evil deity. The cause of her mother's death in a rival family's crossfire. Now, he was just a broken old man, shivering under a cheap wool blanket, terrified not for his own empire, but for his daughter. We need a safe place, Sofia said finally, her voice hard. Not your penthouses, not your mob hideouts, somewhere Matteo doesn't know about. Leonardo's eyes softened, a glimmer of respect breaking through his pain. There is a place, but we will need a miracle to get there. Good, Sofia said, grabbing her keys and a burner phone from her drawer. Because I'm fresh out of patience, and I refuse to let your mess destroy my life twice. The escape was a masterclass in urban survival. Leonardo, though physically shattered, possessed a tactical mind that had ruled Chicago's underworld for 3 decades. Sofia, with her intimate knowledge of the city's overlooked underbelly, the clinics, the homeless shelters, the subway utility tunnels provided the means. They left the apartment at 4 a.m., just as the rain began to clear into a thick, miserable fog. Sofia had stolen a battered 1998 Honda Civic from a neighbor who owed her a favor. It was unregistered, practically invisible in the city's vast sea of traffic. As they drove, the radio crackled with low-level police chatter. Sofia had tuned a scanner app on her burner phone to the local precinct's frequency. What she heard chilled her blood. Dispatch, we have a 10 to 54, multiple casualties at an apartment building on 4th and Halsted, suspected gas leak explosion. Sofia slammed on the brakes, pulling the car into a dark alley. 4th and Halsted, her apartment. She stared at the dashboard, her hands trembling violently. They had missed death by less than 20 minutes. The realization of Matteo's absolute ruthlessness washed over her. He hadn't just sent men to kick down her door. He had firebombed the entire building, risking dozens of innocent civilian lives just to erase one potential witness. This is the world you built, Sofia whispered, her voice laced with venom, staring straight ahead. An apartment full of working-class families, children, all up in flames because of your power struggle. Leonardo sat in the passenger seat, clutching his bleeding side. He looked out the window into the fog. I never sanctioned the killing of innocents. That was the rule. Rules? Sofia scoffed, hitting the steering wheel. There are no rules in hell, Leonardo. You paved the road for men like Matteo. You taught him that power is worth any price. Now, the innocent are paying it. Leonardo fell silent. The moral injustice of his life's work was suddenly laid bare before him, not in the abstract numbers of a ledger, but in the fierce, condemning eyes of his own daughter. The empire he built to protect his family had become the very monster hunting them down. Drive, Leonardo said softly, his voice devoid of its usual command. Drive to Street Thomas Aquinas in Pilsen. Father Thomas. He owes me. They navigated the ghost town streets, avoiding main thoroughfares. Sofia's mind raced. She was now a fugitive, caught in a Mafia civil war. Her normal life was ash. The personal growth she thought she had achieved by running away was an illusion. You cannot run from a shadow. You have to turn around and shine a light on it. They arrived at the imposing Gothic structure of Street Thomas Aquinas, just as dawn began to bleed gray light into the sky. Sofia half-carried Leonardo up the stone steps to the rectory. She pounded on the heavy oak door. Moments later, the door creaked open. An elderly priest with sharp, intelligent eyes stood in a frayed bathrobe. He looked at Sofia, then down at the bloody, broken man leaning against her. "God in heaven," Father Thomas breathed, crossing himself. "Leo, I need sanctuary, Tom," Leonardo gasped, his strength finally failing. He collapsed forward. Sofia and the priest managed to drag him inside, locking the heavy sanctuary doors behind them. They moved him to a cot in the church basement, a hidden room used decades ago during Prohibition, and more recently, by undocumented immigrants seeking refuge. As Father Thomas brought hot water and clean bandages, he looked at Sofia. "You have your mother's eyes. Elena would be proud of you." Sofia stiffened. "My mother is dead because of him. Your mother died trying to save a life, just as you are doing now," Father Thomas said gently. "Leonardo has done terrible things, child. He is a man drowning in his own sins. But tonight, he did not fight for his empire. He fought to keep you alive." Sofia looked at her father, unconscious on the cot. The invincible Don Bianchi, reduced to a shivering, broken refugee in a damp church basement. The anger inside her began to shift, slowly morphing into something more complex. It wasn't forgiveness that was too cheap, too easy. It was a terrifying realization that to defeat Matteo and honor her mother, she would have to step into the very world she had fled. But she wouldn't do it as a criminal. She would do it as a scalpel, precise, cold, and aimed directly at the rot. For 48 hours, the basement of Street Thomas Aquinas became a war room. Leonardo's fever broke on the second night. As his physical strength slowly returned, his mind sharpened. He sat at a small wooden table, a map of Chicago spread out before him, illuminated by a single flickering bulb. Sofia sat across from him, her medical bag serving as a stark contrast to the tactical discussions taking place. "Matteo controls the ports and the unions," Leonardo explained, tracing lines on the map with a bruised finger. "But his real strength right now is political cover. To wipe out my loyalists in one night and blow up a residential building without the FBI tearing the city apart. He has top-level protection." "Commissioner Hayes," Sofia said bluntly. Leonardo looked up, surprised. "How do you know that?" "Because I'm not just a naive civilian," Sofia retorted, crossing her arms. "I treat the collateral damage of your business every night in the ER. 2 weeks ago, Matteo's thugs cleared out a homeless encampment in the South Ward to make way for a new casino development. I patched up 3 men with fractured skulls. The police report filed by the precinct under Hayes' direct command labeled it accidental injuries from a structural collapse. Hayes is on Matteo's payroll." Leonardo leaned back, a grim smile playing on his lips. "You have my intellect, Sofia. As much as you hate to admit it, I use my intellect to save people. You use yours to exploit them," she shot back. "But right now, our goals align. Matteo is a symptom. The corrupt system that allows him to operate is the disease. You want revenge for your empire. I want to stop them from burning down my city." Father Thomas descended the stairs, carrying a tray of soup and stale bread. "The streets are boiling," the priest warned, setting the tray down. "Matteo's men are going door to door in the surrounding neighborhoods. They're looking for a woman with dark hair and a nurse's uniform. They are offering $50,000 for information. It's only a matter of time before someone talks." Leonardo's face darkened. He stood up, wincing as his ribs pulled. "Then I leave. I turn myself over to Matteo. If I surrender, he stops looking for you." Sofia stood up, slamming her hands on the table. The sharp sound echoed in the damp cellar. "Sit down, old man. Do you think your martyrdom makes up for 30 years of blood? If you surrender, Matteo kills you, then he kills me just to be safe. And then he and Hayes turn this city into a slaughterhouse." Leonardo stared at her, genuinely taken aback. The feared Mafia Don was being reprimanded by his daughter, and for the first time in his life, he had absolutely no rebuttal. "So, what is your grand plan, little bird?" Leonardo asked, a hint of genuine curiosity in his raspy voice. "We have no soldiers, no weapons, and no allies. We are ghosts. Ghosts, Sofia repeated, a dangerous, brilliant light sparking in her dark eyes. Exactly. And ghosts can get into places living men can't. You said Hayes provides political cover. That means there's a paper trail. Blackmail. Ledgers. Stored in Hayes' private server at the precinct, heavily encrypted and guarded 24/7, Leonardo said. Impossible to access. Not impossible, Sofia said, pulling out her burner phone. Just requires a different kind of key. She dialed a number. Leonardo watched her. Fascinated. The transformation was startling. The scared nurse from the alley was gone. In her place stood a queen, claiming her dark inheritance, not to rule, but to destroy. Eris, Sofia said into the phone when it connected. It's Sofia. Yes, I'm alive. Listen to me very carefully. You still owe me for covering your surgical rotation last year. I need you to get into the hospital's IT mainframe and pull the precinct's network bypass codes. Don't ask questions. Just do it, or Mateo Vargas is going to own Street Jude's by next week. She hung up, looking back at her father. We don't need an army to kill the king, Sofia said softly. We just need to expose the rot to the sunlight. We are going to orchestrate a trap, and we are going to use Commissioner Hayes' own arrogance to spring it. The plan was a suicide mission, born of desperate brilliance. Sofia's contact, Dr. Eris Thorne, managed to secure the backdoor network access codes used by emergency services to communicate with the police precinct's secure servers. With Leonardo's encyclopedic knowledge of the syndicate's financial structure and Sofia's technical resourcefulness, they spent the next 12 hours building a digital bomb. They compiled evidence, bank transfers from dummy corporations owned by Mateo Vargas directly into offshore accounts managed by Commissioner Hayes. It was the ultimate proof of a city's betrayal. But having the files wasn't enough. If they sent it to the local media, Hayes would intercept it and spin it as a cyber attack. If they went to the local FBI, they risked running into agents on Hayes' payroll. They needed a public, undeniable execution of the truth. They needed the viper to bite itself. We lure them here, Sofia said, standing in the center of the massive, empty sanctuary of Street Thomas Aquinas. The stained glass windows cast fractured, colorful shadows across the wooden pews. To a church? Leonardo asked, limping out from the shadows. He looked around the holy space, clearly uncomfortable. It's a sacrilege, Sofia. Bullets will fly. No bullets, Sofia corrected. A confession. I've wired the church's PA system and microphone directly into a secure, untraceable conference call. I reached out to a contact in the Department of Justice in Washington Internal Affairs, a woman named Agent Vance. She's been trying to build a case on Hayes for years, but could never break the blue wall of silence. Leonardo narrowed his eyes. You're going to put Hayes and Mateo on a live broadcast with the feds? Exactly. But they have to confess voluntarily, Sofia said. And for that, they need to think they've won. They need the prize. Leonardo understood instantly. Me. I make an anonymous call to the precinct, Sofia explained. I tell them I'm the nurse. I say I have Leonardo Bianchi cornered in the church, and I want the $50,000 bounty. Hayes won't send regular cops. He'll come himself with Mateo to ensure you are permanently silenced and that I am dealt with. No witnesses. It's too dangerous, Leonardo growled, his protective instincts flaring. Mateo is unpredictable. If he sees you, he might just shoot first. That's why you have to keep him talking, Sofia said, stepping closer to her father. The space between them, fraught with years of resentment, seemed to shrink. You have to play the defeated king. Appeal to his ego. Make him brag about how he dismantled your empire with Hayes' help. The feds will record every word. Leonardo looked deeply into his daughter's eyes. He saw Elena's courage, but he also saw his own iron will. If this fails, Sofia, you run out the back. You don't look back. You let me take the fall. It won't fail, she said, her voice wavering just a fraction, revealing the terrified daughter beneath the hardened strategist. Promise me, Leonardo demanded, grabbing her shoulders. His grip was weak, but his eyes were fierce. My life ended the moment Matteo betrayed me. Yours is just beginning. Let me do one thing right as a father." Sofia felt a tear slip down her cheek. The moral injustice of their situation, that a man capable of such profound love could be the architect of so much suffering, tore at her heart. "I promise," she whispered. She turned away, wiping her face, and picked up the burner phone. She dialed the local precinct's direct line. "I have Leonardo Bianchi." She spoke into the receiver, her voice deliberately shaking to mimic a terrified civilian. "Street Thomas Aquinas in Pilsen. Bring the money. Come alone." The trap was set. The church fell dead silent, waiting for the devil to arrive. The heavy oak doors of the sanctuary burst open, shattering the holy silence. Rain blew into the church, carrying the scent of ozone and exhaust. Silhouetted in the doorway stood Matteo Vargas, holding a suppressed tactical pistol. Beside him was Commissioner Hayes, a tall, imposing man in a tailored trench coat, holding a heavy flashlight. Two large enforcers flanked them. "Spread out. Secure the exits," Matteo barked, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. They walked slowly down the center aisle. At the altar, illuminated by the soft glow of candlelight, sat Leonardo Bianchi. He was slumped in a high-backed wooden chair, looking every bit the broken, defeated old man. "Well, well," Matteo sneered, stepping up to the altar steps. He gestured with his gun. The great Don Bianchi, reduced to hiding behind the skirts of the church. "Where is the nurse?" "Gone," Leonardo rasped, coughing into his hand. "She took the money I had on me and ran." "She was smarter than you, Matteo." Hayes stepped forward, shining the flashlight into Leonardo's face. "It's over, Leo. You had a good run. But the city needs progress. Your old-school honor codes were holding up billions in development. Hidden in the choir loft above, shrouded in complete darkness, Sofia held her breath. She had her finger hovering over the transmission button on a digital soundboard. The line to Washington was open. Agent Vance and an entire DOJ strike team were listening in real time. "Progress?" Leonardo spat, leaning forward. His voice carried perfectly to the hidden microphone taped beneath the altar. "You call burning down residential buildings progress? Hayes? You call massacring my men on the Eisenhower progress?" Matteo laughed, a cruel, sharp sound. "It's business, old man. You taught me that. You remove the obstacles. The fact that the commissioner here provided us with the police patrol routes so we could hit your convoy, that's just synergy." "Bingo," Sofia thought, her heart hammering against her ribs. "You're a fool, Matteo," Leonardo said, his voice steadying, drawing them deeper into the trap. "Hayes will use you to clean up the slums, build his casinos, and then he'll lock you up to win the mayoral election. You're a pawn." Hayes chuckled, adjusting his coat. "Actually, Leo, you're half right, but Matteo and I have an understanding. 50% of the South Ward casino profits wash through his shell companies. In exchange, the syndicate ensures the unions don't strike. We own this city now, from the gutter to the penthouses. Your era is dead." In the choir loft, Sofia flipped a switch. Suddenly, the church's massive PA system crackled to life. Instead of the choir, a crisp, authoritative woman's voice filled the sanctuary, bouncing off the stone walls like the voice of God. "Commissioner Hayes, this is Special Agent Vance with the Department of Justice Internal Affairs. We have your entire confession on a recorded federal wire. The building is surrounded by FBI tactical units. Drop your weapons and put your hands on your head." Complete, paralyzing shock washed over Matteo and Hayes. Hayes turned pale, dropping his flashlight. What is this?" "A setup," Matteo screamed, his survival instinct overriding his shock. He raised his suppressed pistol, aiming directly at Leonardo's chest. "You son of a bitch, you wore a wire." Sofia didn't hesitate. "No," she screamed from the loft, revealing her position. But Leonardo was already moving. Tapping into a hidden reservoir of adrenaline, the old Don launched himself out of the chair just as Matteo pulled the trigger. The bullet grazed Leonardo's shoulder, tearing through the fabric of his suit. Leonardo tackled Matteo off the altar steps. The two men crashed onto the hard stone floor, grappling for the gun. The two enforcers raised their weapons toward the loft, but the church doors blew open again, this time swarming with FBI tactical agents clad in heavy armor, laser sights cutting through the darkness. Federal agents. Drop it. Hayes immediately dropped to his knees, his hands in the air, recognizing that his life was entirely over. The enforcers dropped their weapons, but on the floor, Matteo was locked in a death struggle with Leonardo. Matteo managed to pry the gun upward, aiming at Leonardo's face. Sofia, having rushed down the loft stairs, sprinted down the aisle. She didn't have a weapon. She only had her voice. "Matteo!" she screamed. Matteo's eyes flicked to her for a fraction of a second. It was all Leonardo needed. With a vicious, calculated twist, Leonardo disarmed Matteo, shattering the man's wrist. The gun skittered across the stone floor. Leonardo grabbed Matteo by the throat, pinning him down, his fist raised to deliver a lethal blow. "Dad, stop!" Sofia yelled, stopping a few feet away. The word echoed in the sudden silence of the church, louder than any gunshot. "Dad!" Leonardo froze. His fist, trembling with decades of ingrained violence, hovered over Matteo's terrified face. He looked at Sofia. She was breathing heavily, tears streaming down her face, shaking her head. "Don't," she pleaded softly. "If you kill him, you're the same monster he is. Let the law have him. Let it end today. Please." Leonardo looked down at the man who had betrayed him, the man who had ordered the death of innocents. The old Leonardo would have crushed his throat without a second thought. But as he looked at his daughter, the woman who had saved him, who had orchestrated the downfall of his enemies without firing a single bullet, he realized his empire was ashes, but his soul could still be saved. Slowly, deliberately, Leonardo lowered his fist. He released Matteo's throat and stood up, swaying slightly, blood dripping from his shoulder. He held his hands up as the FBI agents swarmed them, clicking handcuffs onto Matteo and Hayes. An agent approached Leonardo, weapons drawn. Leonardo didn't resist. He looked past the agent, holding Sofia's gaze. For the first time in 5 years, the Dawn of Chicago smiled. It was a soft, genuine smile of a father who was finally proud. "It's over, little bird," he whispered, as the cold steel cuffs locked around his wrists. "You won." The fallout was biblical. The recording from Street Thomas Aquinas became the most infamous piece of evidence in Chicago's judicial history. Commissioner Hayes' arrest triggered a domino effect that brought down a dozen corrupt judges, politicians, and police captains. The public outrage was deafening, a moral reckoning that swept through the city like a cleansing fire. Matteo Vargas turned state's evidence, but it didn't save him from a life sentence in a supermax facility. The syndicate, utterly fractured without Leonardo and exposed by the federal sweep, crumbled into dust. As for Leonardo Bianchi, he did the unthinkable. He refused legal counsel and pleaded guilty to 3 decades of racketeering, extortion, and conspiracy. He negotiated a single condition with the DOJ: complete, unassailable immunity and witness protection for his daughter, Sofia. He took the fall for his entire empire, sacrificing his freedom to ensure the cycle of violence ended with him. 6 months later, the federal penitentiary in Marion, Illinois, was a bleak fortress of concrete and steel. Sofia sat in the stark visitor's room, her hands folded neatly on the metal table. A heavy steel door buzzed open, and Leonardo walked in. He wore an orange jumpsuit, his silver hair cropped short. He looked older, thinner, but the heavy, dark burden that had always shadowed his eyes was completely gone. He looked at peace. He sat down across from her, picking up the heavy black telephone receiver. Sofia picked up hers. Separated by thick, bulletproof glass, they looked at each other. "You look well, Sofia," Leonardo said, his voice transmitted through the crackling line. "I am," she replied. She reached into her bag and pulled out a glossy brochure, pressing it flat against the glass for him to see. It read, "The Elena Bianchi Medical Foundation, Free Clinic and Trauma Center. The state seized your assets," Sofia explained, her voice steady and proud. "But the DOJ allowed me to keep the clean shell corporations my mother set up before she died. We liquidated them. We bought the building Matteo tried to burn down. We rebuilt it. It's a free clinic now for the undocumented and the uninsured. Leonardo stared at the brochure through the glass. A single silent tear escaped his eye, tracking down his weathered cheek. Elena's dream, he whispered. And mine, Sofia said softly. You destroyed a lot of lives, Dad. I can't forgive you for all of it. Maybe I never will, but you gave me the chance to start fixing it. You stepped into the light. Leonardo placed his palm against the cold glass. You were the light, Sofia. I was just drowning in the dark until you pulled me out. Sofia placed her hand over his on the glass. The physical barrier between them was absolute, but the emotional chasm that had separated them for a lifetime was finally bridged. The Mafia boss was dead. Only the father remained. When Sofia walked out of the prison gates, the Illinois sky was clear and bright. The air smelled of fresh rain and blooming pine. She had faced the darkest parts of her city and her own bloodline, and she had not blinked. She had learned that true resilience wasn't about running from your past. It was about confronting it, breaking it down, and rebuilding it into something that heals. She got into her car, started the engine, and drove toward the city skyline. There was work to do. There were lives to save. And for the first time in her life, Sofia Bianchi wasn't running away. She was finally going home. Conclusion. Thank you for experiencing this intense journey of redemption, courage, and the unbreakable power of truth. Sofia's story reminds us that even in the darkest, most corrupt corners of the world, a single act of bravery and moral conviction can shatter an empire and change everything. No matter your past, it is never too late to step into the light and rewrite your legacy. If this story of resilience, dignity, and family transformation resonated with you, please hit that like button to support the channel. Share this video with someone who loves a gripping cinematic drama, and don't forget to subscribe for more thrilling, character-driven fiction every week. Drop a comment below. Did Leonardo deserve his redemption? See you in the next story.